Chapter 1. A Drunken Duel. The annual celestial summit of Mount Huayin was a gathering for the finest immortals of the realm. A sacred event filled with solemn rituals, philosophical debates, and rigorous contests of cultivation. Which is exactly why Li Qingzhao decided it was the perfect place for a prank. Disguised as a humble wine vendor with a crooked smile and a fake hunch, Li wheeled a cart up the misty slope. The path sparkled with celestial runes, glowing faintly under the moonlight, but he tiptoed past the spirit sentries with ease, his illusion technique flawless. Immortal peach wine. Aged in divine barrels. Guaranteed to make even stone-faced immortals blush. He cried with a theatrical bow. The crowd was too dignified to respond at first, but soon the younger cultivators flocked to him. Laughter erupted as they tasted the potent brew and fell into silly squabbles and impromptu dance battles. Even a few elders pretended not to notice as they sipped quietly behind sleeves. All was going splendidly, until he wandered into the meditation grove and mistook Meilin for a statue. She was sitting cross-legged, sword across her knees, eyes closed in deep cultivation. Her silver robes shimmered in the starlight, and her long black hair pooled around her like a halo of ink. A soft spiritual wind circled her, warding off all who dared approach. Except of course Li Qingzhao. Such perfect stillness. Such grace. Truly the finest sculpture I've ever seen. He leaned in closer, then poked her cheek. The temperature in the grove dropped 10 degrees. Meilin opened her eyes. Cold, stormy silver clashed with playful amber. She spoke one word. Die. The explosion of sword energy blasted Li 10 feet into the air. Wait. This isn't how I flirt. Swords clashed, wind howled, and the ground cracked as they dueled across the summit. Spectators fled as mountain peaks crumbled. Li dodged with style and blew kisses between parries. Expression stoic, summoned sword shadows that danced like lotus petals. After the 30th flying peach jug exploded in mid-air, the heaven tribunal appeared. A giant scroll unfurled from the clouds and an immortal judge thundered, Meilin of the Azure Lotus Sect. Li Qingzhao the rogue trickster. You are hereby bound by the red thread of heaven for 100 years, as punishment for your reckless destruction of sacred grounds. A glowing red thread shot from the sky, tying their wrists together. Li blinked. Wait. Marriage rope? You looked murderous. The judge continued. Until you can prove your hearts are in harmony, you shall share your fates. Your destinies, cultivation, and travels are now entwined. Good luck. And with a flash of light, the scroll vanished. Li tugged the thread. It glowed and pulled you toward him. She tugged back. He flew 10 feet into a tree. Groaning from the branch, Li grinned. Well, wife, shall we begin our honeymoon? Meilin drew her sword. He swallowed. Perhaps. We start with counseling? Chapter 2. The Thread of Fates. Meilin woke to find a rooster crowing near her ear. Not an actual rooster. Li Qingzhao crouched on a nearby rock, crowing at the rising sun with wild, theatrical flair. Caw-caw. Behold our first morning as soul-bound companions, he cried. She hurled a stone at his head. It hit. The rock clattered to the ground and Li fell dramatically after it, landing flat on his back. A fierce morning greeting. You truly are a passionate wife. I am not your wife, you snapped, standing. The cursed thread shimmered between them. The moment she stepped more than 10 paces away, it yanked him along. He scrambled upright and dusted himself off. Technically, you can't get rid of me for 99 more years, 364 days. Then I'll cultivate in a cave for the next century. I'll bring snacks. Their day began with predictable friction. You attempted to perform her morning sword routine. Li danced around her, asking absurd questions like, do you think soul bonds tangle during naps? Or, if I cook spirit rabbit, would that be cannibalism? By mid-morning, they attempted to travel to Red Willow Town for a spirit beast extermination you had been contracted to handle. The task was simple. Discreetly dispatch a 3-tailed fox beast terrorizing the crops. But nothing remained simple when Li Qingzhao was involved. First, he insisted they take the scenic route, to strengthen our marital bond. Then he stopped at every roadside stall, tasting spicy skewers, challenging children to drinking games with tea, and even purchasing a novelty fan that read, Kiss the Cultivator in pink lettering. Meilin's left eye twitched. If you stop one more time, Ah, but look. Li pointed. That innkeeper is smiling at me. She must recognize my unparalleled handsomeness. She recognizes a man asking to be stabbed. As they argued, a scream rang from the fields. The fox beast had returned. You dashed toward the noise, only to be yanked back. The red thread shimmered taut. Li was still flirting at the noodle cart. She growled, storming back and dragging him by the wrist. Battle first, seduction later. The fox beast was no joke, 20 feet long, fur bristling with flame, eyes glowing violet. He summoned her sword. Li tossed his fan aside and summoned 3 glowing spirit gourds that hovered protectively. The battle was chaos. You slashed with elegance and precision. Li bounced around like a butterfly, flinging charm papers and cackling. The fox lunged, snapping trees in half. You leapt high, only for the thread to yank her midair when Li ducked unexpectedly. They crashed into each other. Her sword landed in a tree. Li groaned beneath her. Well, he wheezed. If you wanted to fall for me, you could have just said so. Somehow they still won. Mostly thanks to you pinning the fox under a binding array while he shoved a gourd in its mouth. Back at the village, the grateful elder offered them spirit rice and blessings. May the red thread tie your hearts tightly for all eternity. You grit her teeth. Li winked. We're already halfway there. Later that night, under a moonlit sky, they camped in awkward silence. Li lay sprawled beside the fire. I know you hate me, he murmured, unusually quiet. You blinked. You think. I'm not trying to ruin your life. Just live it with a bit more flair. She said nothing. Then, you're infuriating. But you make me feel something other than cold. He turned his head, surprised. She didn't meet his gaze. A breeze stirred the thread that bound them. Li smiled. Well, partner, that's the nicest death threat I've ever received. She sighed. Just sleep. He closed his eyes. Night, wife. You didn't correct him. Chapter 3. Sect Shenanigans. The Azure Lotus sect was a sanctuary of serenity, pristine waterfalls, elegant pavilions, and disciples who spoke in hushed, reverent tones. It was also the last place anyone expected to find Li Qingzhao, which was why chaos broke out within 30 minutes of his arrival. The moment Meilin stepped through the mist-cloaked gates with Li trailing behind, the sect disciples gasped. Some dropped their scrolls. Others stared at the shimmering red thread linking their wrists like it was a demonic artifact. Is that senior sister you? With a man. And holding hands? Yu's voice dropped several degrees. We are not holding hands. Li beamed. Only hearts. The sect master, a serene white-bearded man named Elder Han, welcomed them with a look that twitched slightly at the corners. I've read the tribunal's decree, he said with forced calm. You may stay. But try not to destroy anything. Li bowed low. I vow to be as silent as falling snow. That vow lasted exactly 1 hour. By afternoon, Li had taught 3 junior disciples how to play spirit dice, a gambling game that involved minor electrocution and singing embarrassing poetry. By sunset, he had replaced the sect's tranquil music charms with enchanted ones that played romantic ballads whenever you passed by. I'd climb 1,000 peaks, I'd tame a demon bear, just to kiss the lips of Meilin fared. She stormed into the music hall and obliterated the crystal array with one precise swing of her sword. Li clapped. I muse. So fierce. It got worse. You found him meditating on the roof of her private residence, sipping wine with her spirit cat curled in his lap. How did you get in here? She asked, deadly quiet. The thread pulled me. Clearly, fate wants us to share more than just awkward silences. The thread doesn't decide where you sit. He winked. But it doesn't forbid rooftop dates either. Disciples began treating Li like a strange but entertaining storm. He disrupted lectures, gifted bizarre spiritual trinkets. One elder now had a fan that sneezed when it sensed lies, and somehow convinced a group of outer sect students to build a hot spring. It's for stress relief, he told you. You're far too tense. A soak might unfreeze that icy heart. Just when you thought it couldn't get worse, her childhood acquaintance arrived. Elder Feng Yan, a cold, distinguished man with the personality of a porcelain blade. He took one look at Li and narrowed his eyes. This is the scoundrel you're bound to? You pinched the bridge of her nose. It's not my choice. Feng Yan frowned deeper. You always deserved better. Li stepped forward, smiling. Good to meet you. I'm her unwanted soulmate. You are an insult to cultivation. I've been called worse. Usually by sword-wielding beauties. Tension sparked between the two men like flint and dry leaves. You stood between them, arms crossed. I will not be the prize in a sword-measuring contest, she said flatly. That night, while you retreated to her chamber, Li stood outside looking up at the stars. The sect was quiet. Too quiet. A soft voice startled him. Why do you always act like a fool? You stood nearby, arms tucked into her sleeves. Li tilted his head. Because if I act serious, I'll start feeling too much. She stepped closer. And if you felt too much? He looked at her, not teasing for once. Then I'd fall. She held his gaze for a moment longer before turning away. Try not to burn the kitchen again. He watched her leave. No promises, wife. From a window above, Elder Han sighed. Why do I sense another mountain explosion coming? Chapter 4. The Love Trial Valley. The scroll crackled with spiritual energy as Meilin unrolled it across the tea table. Li Qingzhao leaned in, eyes narrowing. Love Trial Valley? Sounds romantic. It's a forbidden realm created by the ancient cultivator Ling Yu. Legend says it challenges your heart through illusion trials, you explained. If we pass, the red thread's curse can be severed. Li raised a brow. But what if we fail? She gave him a dry look. Then we stay stuck together for 96 more years. Not the worst fate, he muttered. You do look lovely when you glare. The entrance to the valley shimmered in soft pinks and silvers, like silk under moonlight. A heart-shaped portal floated in midair, guarded by an immortal statue holding twin lotus blades. Li poked it. Why do I feel like I'm walking into a drunken matchmaker's dream? Because you are. You stepped through without hesitation. He followed and the world changed. They stood in a small house. A mortal house. The smell of steamed buns drifted from the kitchen. On the wall were wedding portraits, Meilin smiling in red robes. Li beside her, beaming. Oh no, Li whispered. I have a job. You, now in a plain apron, entered the kitchen and found herself pulling buns from a wooden steamer. Her hands moved on instinct. A toddler toddled toward her, calling out, Mama. Her heart nearly stopped. Li appeared in the doorway, hair tied up neatly, holding scrolls. I'll head to the clinic after breakfast. They stared at each other. This is a hallucination, you said. Sure, but a strangely warm one. Each trial grew more intense. In the next, they were bitter enemies. You wore black, her hair unbound, scarred from battle. Li stood atop a burning pagoda, commanding an army of shadow beasts. Their swords clashed midair. Hatred, fury, and underneath, grief. You betrayed me, she shouted. You were never mine to betray, he yelled back. The illusion cracked. In the third trial, they were star-crossed lovers from rival sects, forced to choose between love and duty. In another, they were wandering cultivators with no memories, drawn to each other again and again. Each time they failed the trial, they were ejected into a misty void, breathless, disoriented. You gritted her teeth. These illusions are exposing our deepest emotions. It's exhausting. Li sat cross-legged beside her, staring into the fog. I've lived 7 centuries without caring too much about anyone. Now suddenly, it's all crashing down. She didn't speak, but their thread pulsed between them. Final trial. They found themselves old. White-haired, wrinkled, sitting on a veranda under wisteria vines. Their hands were clasped. A kettle steamed quietly beside them. You looked down. This isn't bad. Li squeezed her hand. I like the idea of falling in love with you slowly over 1,000 lifetimes. The illusion faded gently. The valley rejected them. The red thread glowed brighter, unbroken. As they stumbled out into the real world again, you sighed. We failed. Li looked at her and smiled. Maybe. But if failing means seeing all the ways I could love you, I'll keep failing. For once she didn't argue. Chapter 5. The Ex-Lovers Sect. It began with a love letter nailed to a tree. Li Qingzhao found it while attempting to pick spirit plums for breakfast. The letter was written in gold ink and sealed with a crimson wax rose. He opened it without hesitation. To the couple bound by the red thread of heaven, he read aloud, squinting at the flourish of the calligraphy. Your love echoes across the realms. Come to Scarlet Moon Cliff and discover your destiny. Meilin read over his shoulder, unimpressed. It's clearly a trap. Ah, but what a beautifully written trap, Li said, tucking the letter into his robes. We must go. She glared. No, we must not. They went. Scarlet Moon Cliff was a jagged peak veiled in crimson mist, surrounded by cherry blossoms that bloomed despite the lack of sunlight. A shimmering bridge of rose-colored jade led to a pagoda that pulsed with spiritual energy. A dozen cultivators in pink and black robes greeted them. Each one wore a pendant shaped like a cracked heart. Welcome, said a woman with sharp cheekbones and a distant gaze. You have entered the domain of the sect of former lovers. You blinked. That's a sect. The woman nodded. Founded by those who loved deeply and lost tragically. We gather here to purge attachment through the ritual of release. Li whistled. Sounds like group therapy with fireworks. They were escorted inside. The sect hall was draped in silks with candles casting dramatic shadows. At the center stood a ceremonial stage with twin seats shaped like lotus petals. You narrowed her eyes. They think we're together. Li grinned. We could correct them. Or we could pretend to be madly in love and see what happens. Her stare could have sliced spirit steel. I will kill you. But think of the drama. That evening they were dressed in ceremonial robes, hers flowing lavender, his a deep crimson. The ritual began with them holding hands and gazing into each other's eyes while elders chanted love poems with theatrical passion. Li cleared his throat. Beloved Meilin, your swordsmanship pierced more than demons. It pierced my heart. She deadpanned. And your face pierces my patience. The sect leader clapped. Such fire. A couple bound by passion. Now begin the dance of severance. A spiritual formation flared beneath their feet. Illusions swirled. Past versions of them from the love trial valley. Married, enemies, strangers drawn to one another again and again. But as the illusions repeated, something strange happened. Yu's chest tightened. In each version she recognized something she hadn't before. The way Li always turned toward her first when danger struck. The way his eyes lit up when she spoke, even if it was to scold him. Li meanwhile stared at the illusions with a faint smile. You know, he whispered, pretending to love you is starting to feel a little too easy. The formation trembled. The cracked heart pendants glowed on every elder present. The sect leader rose. You must now confess your greatest regret. You hesitated. Li said softly, I regret that I only started to fall for you because we were forced together. I wish it had been my choice. The air went still. You looked at him. I regret that I don't hate being tied to you. Gasps echoed. The spiritual array shattered. A surge of power knocked everyone backward. The red thread sparked like lightning but did not break. The sect was thrown into disarray. One elder burst into tears. Another threw a chair off the balcony. You two are hopeless, the leader wailed. We can't even exorcise your affection. As Li Anyu stood in the middle of the chaos, he chuckled. So, dinner. She rolled her eyes, but her lips curved upward. You're paying. They walked off the cliffside together, laughter echoing behind them. Chapter 6. Moonlight Sword and Peach Wine. It was nearly midnight when Meilin found herself climbing the final slope of the Nine Blossoms Peak. The moonlight bathed the cliffs in silver, and the faint scent of peach blossoms clung to the air despite the elevation. Li Qingzhao walked beside her, unusually quiet. He hadn't made a single flirtatious remark since they'd started their climb. Ahead lay the celestial orchid, a rare herb that could sever soul bonds, according to the old scroll they found in the Azure Lotus Sect's restricted archives. It only bloomed once every 100 years under a full moon infused with dragon chi. If we succeed, you said softly, we'll be free of the red thread. Li nodded, eyes fixed on the glowing summit. Free. Silence stretched between them. The last 100 paces were steep and treacherous. You led the way, agile and precise, her sword slashing away thorny vines. Li followed with grace but a little slower. Not from fatigue, just hesitation. At the summit, the celestial orchid bloomed. It was ethereal. Its petals shimmered between blue and gold, pulsing with life. It floated just above the altar stone, guarded by a barrier of wind and light. You reached out to test the ward, but Li stopped her. Let's rest for a moment first. You blinked. Now. He plopped down onto a flat rock and pulled out 2 small jars of peach wine. If we're going to change our fate, we should toast to it. She stared at him. You brought wine to a spiritual herb extraction? I bring wine to funerals. And weddings. This feels like both. She hesitated, then sat. The wind rustled her robes. Li handed her a jar and they sipped in silence. I used to think, Li said after a while, that bonds were chains. I ran from every one of them. Sex lovers. I didn't want to be bound. You looked at him from the corner of her eye. And now? He turned his gaze to the orchid. Now I'm not sure if breaking this one would free me, or just leave me empty. The moonlight cast long shadows across his face. Yu's heart beat a little faster. She spoke carefully. When this started, I hated you. You were loud, foolish, arrogant. Li smirked. All true. But you made me laugh again. You reminded me what it's like to feel human. I hadn't felt that in a long time. Their eyes met. Something fragile passed between them. He leaned in slightly. If I kissed you right now, would you slice me in half? She didn't move away. Try it and find out. He did. The kiss was tentative at first. Then like a dam breaking, it deepened. Years of tension, denial, and near-death bickering melted into one silent confession under the moon. When they pulled apart, the orchid still glowed beside them. Untouched. You stood and faced it. Her sword hovered in her hand. One swing would break the seal, pluck the herb, and end the bond. She didn't swing. They came to stand beside her. So? She let the sword lower. I'm not ready to let go. He exhaled, grinning. You just saved us 100 years of regret. They sat together until dawn, watching the orchid fade with the morning sun. It had bloomed and they had chosen. Not freedom. Each other. Chapter 7. Enemies Reunited. The descent from Nine Blossoms Peak was quiet, filled with unspoken thoughts and the gentle pull of the red thread between them. Li Qingzhao whistled occasionally, but even his tunes carried a softer lilt than usual. They were halfway down the trail when a low rumble rolled through the mountains. Meilin froze. Demonic energy. Li's smile vanished. Old. Powerful. Familiar. Moments later, the sky darkened, clouds swirling unnaturally. From the horizon emerged a figure clad in black and crimson, a long tattered cloak trailing behind him like a storm. Demon General Wuxia, you whispered, her hand instinctively tightening on her sword. Li's expression darkened. He's alive. Wuxia hovered above them, crimson eyes glowing. You Meilin. We meet again. Yu's lips pressed into a thin line. I should have buried you deeper. Wuxia's smirk widened. Still so cold. I wonder if your new consort has warmed you up. Li stepped forward. Back from the dead and still insecure, I see. Wuxia laughed. Ah, the clown. How charming. Shall we see if you're as good at dying as you are at jokes? Without warning, black flames roared toward them. You blocked with her blade, the clash sending shockwaves through the cliffs. Li countered with illusionary clones, distracting Wuxia long enough to evade a direct strike. But Wuxia was stronger than before, faster, more precise. His strikes were laced with dark resentment, each one aimed to wound not just the body but the soul. Yu and Li fought in perfect tandem, the red thread guiding their movement like a shared rhythm. For once they didn't argue. Didn't tease. They simply moved as one. Wuxia sneered. So it's true. You've fallen for him. You spun midair, blade glowing white-hot. I'd rather fall for a rogue than a traitor. Enraged, Wuxia unleashed his final move, Black Lotus Bloom, a technique forbidden even in the demon realm. The sky split open as a field of shadowy lotuses surged outward. Li tackled you out of the blast. They landed hard, the thread between them sparking wildly. Blood trickled from Li's lip. He smiled anyway. If I die today, I'm glad it's beside you. Yu's breath hitched. You're not dying. Not today. She rose, eyes blazing. Drawing power from their shared bond, she slashed forward with every ounce of cultivation she had. The red thread flared, channeling their intertwined energies into one radiant arc. The black lotus disintegrated. Wuxia screamed as the light consumed him. When silence returned, only ash remained where the demon general once stood. You collapsed to her knees, trembling. Li joined her slowly, leaning in so their shoulders touched. You saved me, she murmured. He chuckled, weak but warm. You're finally admitting I'm worth saving? She glanced at him. Don't ruin the moment. He grinned. No promises. They sat amid the wreckage, side by side until the sky cleared. Chapter 8. Sect of Secrets. After the battle with Wu Ying, word spread quickly. By the time Meilin and Li Qingzhao returned to the Azure Lotus sect, a small crowd awaited them. Elders, disciples and curious cultivators from nearby sects lined the path, whispering and staring at the still glowing red thread between their wrists. They say they defeated Demon General Wu Ying together. Bound by the red thread, and by fate. They're a couple now, right? Meilin strode past them all, expression unreadable. Li followed with his usual swagger, though he didn't toss out a single flirtatious comment. It was Elder Han who met them at the steps. Come. The council wishes to speak with you. Inside the sect's inner chamber, the 7 most powerful elders of the Azure Lotus sect sat in a circle, a glowing scroll suspended in the center. You've attracted attention, Elder Han said, glancing at the scroll. Even the spirit court in Heaven's Reach is watching. They've requested you both attend a hearing. Yu's brow furrowed. Why? Because the red thread has grown stronger. And because Wu Ying's last words contained a prophecy. Li blinked. A prophecy? Elder Han nodded gravely. He said, the red thread shall bind the calamity and the savior. One heart must break to save the realms. You exchanged a look with Li. Cryptic. As always. You leave tomorrow. Their journey to Heaven's Reach was quiet at first. The road wound through misty forests and celestial bridges. At a small village inn, Li surprised you by cooking dinner himself. She arched a brow. You can cook. He presented a bowl of spirit herb congee. I used to cook for a girl once. He broke my heart. I broke her favorite wok. He took a bite. It's good. Li looked genuinely pleased. You flatter me, Ice Queen. Later that night, under a pavilion of glowing moon lotus lanterns, they sat side by side. Li pulled out a flute and played a soft, haunting tune. You turned to him. That melody. It's ancient. My mother used to hum it. They didn't speak more after that. Just sat in silence, the kind that felt oddly full. Heaven's Reach was unlike anything else in the realm. Floating mountains suspended by ancient spells, golden gates carved with starlight, and immortal cultivators that glowed faintly with divine energy. At the spirit court, they knelt before an audience of celestial judges. The red thread between them pulsed faintly. A silver-robed judge spoke. You carry the mark of destiny. The bond that has lasted 7 lives, shattered in 6 and now reaches its final chance. Yu's heart skipped. 7 lives. The judge nodded. You have always found each other. Always bound, always broken. But now the red thread is fully awakened. If it frays this time, both your souls will scatter. Li swallowed hard. That's inconvenient. Only love willingly chosen can preserve it. But danger looms. There are forces who wish to tear it asunder, to shatter the realms in the process. You stepped forward. Then tell us what to do. The judge's gaze softened. Stay together. Choose each other freely. And when the time comes, protect what matters most. They were dismissed, but the air around them felt heavier. As they descended Heaven's Reach the next morning, Li said quietly, 7 lives, huh? You nodded. And I've only remembered 1. He touched the thread gently. Let's make this the one we don't forget. Chapter 9. A thread tested. The days that followed their return from Heaven's Reach were oddly calm, too calm. Meilin resumed her duties at the Azure Lotus sect, training disciples, sparring with elders and studying ancient texts. But everywhere she went, eyes followed her. Whispers buzzed behind closed doors. Li Qingzhao meanwhile spent his time disrupting the peace. Why are you charming the courtyard cranes to sing ballads at dawn? Meilin growled one morning. They were bored. And besides, they sing better than Elder Ping. Despite the antics, tension lingered. It wasn't the red thread pulling them closer. It was the quiet dread of Wu Ying's prophecy. Of a heart that must break. Then it happened. A rift opened over the southern wastes. Crimson lightning split the sky, and demonic chi spilled out like ink across the clouds. Wu Ying's army had returned. The cultivator clans rallied. Azure Lotus was asked to lead the vanguard. And you Meilin naturally would command the front. Li stood beside her as orders were shouted, spells prepared and scrolls burned for reinforcement. You're not going without me, he said. You shook her head. You're not a general. He grinned. No, I'm worse. I'm unpredictable. They fought side by side once more as the demonic forces surged forth. The skies turned black. Entire rivers boiled. But Yu's sword gleamed like starlight, and Li's illusions broke enemy ranks. For a while it seemed the tide would turn. Then Wu Ying returned. This time he had merged with a corrupted celestial beast. His form shifted between shadows and storm, his eyes glowing with malice. You faced him at the heart of the battlefield. The prophecy screamed in her ears. One heart must break. Wu Ying laughed. Still protecting your clown? How noble. Li stepped forward. Hurt her and I'll haunt you through every realm. But Wu Ying was too strong. Every strike forced them back. Then Li faltered. A blow meant for you redirected toward him, searing his side. Blood blossomed across his robe. You screamed. No. The red thread blazed. You surged forward, every ounce of her cultivation pouring into a final technique, one forbidden even within her sect. It would destroy Wu Ying, but it would sever the bond. Forever. Li caught her wrist. Meilin, she whispered, I won't lose you again. And with a tear sliding down her cheek she released the sword. Wu Ying's form shattered in light. The battlefield fell silent. But the thread, it unraveled. Slowly. Painfully. You dropped to her knees, the sword clattering beside her. No. No. Li collapsed beside her. Still breathing. Still alive. But the thread was gone. They stared at each other in stunned silence. We broke it, she said. He touched her face, voice hoarse. We're still here. But the bond. He leaned in. Then we'll choose each other. And again. She nodded, heart cracking and swelling all at once. The heavens trembled, but this time not from war. From a new beginning. Chapter 10. A choice eternal. The battlefield was quiet. Not with peace but with exhaustion. Meilin sat in the ruins of the old pavilion overlooking the valley, her sword resting against the cracked stone railing. The red thread that had once tied her to Li Qingzhao was gone, and in its absence, a hollow ache remained. She stared at her hand, where once the thread had pulsed with warmth, purpose and mischief. Now only silence. Behind her, footsteps approached. You're brooding, Li said, his voice light but gentle. I'm thinking, she replied. Dangerous. He turned to him. He looked the same and yet not. His smile was quieter, his eyes more open. The teasing still flickered there, but beneath it now was something deeper. I should have protected the bond, she said. Maybe I was selfish. Li sat beside her. You were brave. You chose me over fate. But the heavens. Let the heavens learn to mind their own business. She laughed. It surprised them both. The weeks that followed were filled with rebuilding. Clans worked together, the southern wastes were cleansed, and Wu Ying's name faded into myth. But for you and Li, the hardest part wasn't the battle. It was the silence after. Without the thread, there were no more tugs in the night, no sudden flickers of emotion not their own. What was left was simply choice. One evening, Li appeared outside her training courtyard with a small peach blossom tree in a pot. Planting roots, he said. She blinked. In a pot. He shrugged. Symbolism. You always did love metaphors. Another day she found him repairing the music array in the sect's courtyard. Putting back the romantic serenades, she teased. He smirked. No. These ones are duets. The spring festival arrived. Disciples scattered lanterns through the air and fireworks painted the sky. Li stood beside you at the edge of the lake. Neither spoke. Finally he turned to her. I know we lost the thread. But if I tied one end around my wrist and handed you the other, would you still take it? She looked at him, truly looked. No fate, no prophecy. Just him. The rogue. The ridiculous poet. The man who would burn down the heavens just to make her smile. She reached into her sleeve. Pulled out a red ribbon. Tied it around his wrist. Then held out her own. He laughed, a little breathless, and tied the second knot. I guess this is the part where I stop running, he said. She stepped closer. Only if you're ready to walk beside me. He cupped her face. In every lifetime. with or without a thread. And he kissed her. Above them the sky exploded in light. The heavens did not interfere. For once they watched quietly, perhaps even approvingly, as two immortals no longer bound by magic or prophecy chose love. Freely. Forever. Epilogue. 100 years later. The peach blossom tree had grown. It now stood tall beside a quiet pavilion overlooking a silver lake within the azure lotus sect. Beneath its shade, a small table hosted 2 teacups, a wine jar and the occasional plate of cloud cakes. Meilin sipped her tea watching the younger disciples spar in the courtyard below. She no longer barked corrections unless they were truly awful, which unfortunately was often. From the roof came a lazy drawl. "You're glaring again. That poor disciple's just trying to master his balance." "I've seen bamboo with better footwork," you replied. Li Qingzhao flipped down beside her, robes still as pristine as ever despite his general disregard for dignity. He placed a scroll in front of her. "Another request to join the sect of the threadless," he said. You raised a brow. "Still a ridiculous name. Blame our students. They think we're romantic icons." She smirked. "We're old. We're ancient," he agreed, pouring wine. "But apparently timeless." In the years since the red thread unraveled, cultivators from every realm had come to them, not for matchmaking but for guidance. On how to love without fate's decree. On choosing even when the stars didn't shine in your favor. Yuan Li taught swordsmanship, illusion arts, philosophy, and occasionally how to survive your partner's temper. There were mistakes, heartbreaks, triumphs. But what remained steady was their presence. Together. Always. That evening lanterns once again floated across the lake. Li handed her a small red ribbon. "Another one?" she asked. He shrugged. "Every year. Just to make sure." He took it. Tied it gently around his wrist. He mirrored the motion. And hand in hand they watched the sky light up with joy. Love, it turned out, didn't need prophecy. Just choice. And 2 people stubborn enough to keep making it.